Well, let's speak now to a man who spends considerable time delivering aid to vulnerable communities in Nigeria and assessing the increasing poverty levels in the country. Gabriel Ashibi works with the Universal Peace Foundation and the Humanity First campaign, and he joins me now in the studio. Thank you ever so much for coming in. One of the reasons we wanted to talk to you is because you're in the front line of the fight against poverty, particularly at this critical time, with COVID-19 stopping people who would normally go out and hustle on a daily basis, stopping them from being able to do that. So take us with you to the places that you have been, because you were out even yesterday delivering food aid to people.
Okay, it's a very simple dynamics. The statistics are there. We don't need to preach this. Even the people understand that a time like this is a very terrible one for Nigeria and Africa as a whole. From my experience, I realized that we can only quarantine COVID-19, but we cannot quarantine hunger. The people are ready to come out. Whatever it takes them to come out, they are not caring about quarantine or security agencies. As far as they are hungry, they must get food. About 70% of our people live from hand to mouth. And they are not seeing anything from anywhere. And how do you want them to survive? Some have families up to 3-4 kids. Yesterday, we did one of our first projects here in Abuja. And it was scary to see that even families, we planned for just 100 children, but we saw families, mom, dad, everybody coming to struggle for a meal. We called it a lunch break. It's not the sharing of rice. We cooked and then took it to a center, say, okay, we made agreement that, okay, we just 100 children. But before we know, we have adults, we have women, people coming in that they are hungry. And so it's scary at a time like this.
And of course, when we talk about hunger and poverty, is it fair to say that, as you were pointing out, there can't be many more poverty-ravaged countries like Nigeria, although the country tends to live in some sort of deception that it's slightly better than other countries. But it's now got the highest number of people in the world living in extreme poverty, mired as it is in a long-running insurgency in the north, and that, in addition to this current COVID-19, has unleashed a humanitarian crisis.
Sincerely speaking, we saw something on international media between yesterday and today where people were actually running after a moving truck just to catch a grab of bag of rice. I think our country needs to rise up now. You see, we've always talked about government should get serious and let's know actually how many people are in Nigeria. Let's begin to do a proper structure of who our citizens are. At a time like this, you can make budgeting for how to take care of people. We've heard so much that government is giving this, giving that, people have donated money, but there is no structural plan to get that done. We've realized that, okay, now in Abuja, for example, I told that palliatives are going out, and Lagos too. These are the very two hit communities, and Kano too, which I just added. And that palliatives have gone out, but my family is in Lagos. I called. They haven't seen anything. In Abuja, if you ask anybody, they haven't seen anything. But there's news going around here that people are already getting stuff from government. It's a lie. Now, we have about 20 or 25 billion already donated as palliative from well-wishers and people who are concerned about efforts of government. Yes, government is doing great in terms of awareness and also trying to see how they can cope the pandemic. But I think the government should have a structural plan.
Right, when you talk about a structural plan, that's obviously getting the aid out to people who need it. Yes. How do you think that can best be done?
Yes, I thought about this, and I feel that the government needs to bring in the public sector and the private sector and set up an agency. An agency that will be given the responsibility, a very accessible and transparent agency. An agency that we can ask questions to know exactly how, for example, in the United States, for example, I read something today that the government has actually earmarked about 25 billion for testing. In our country today, I don't think there's any widespread testing going out. There's also about $400 billion to help minor businesses to start back post-COVID.
That's a new thing that was just passed by the Senate in Congress yesterday. It's still waiting to be passed by the House of Representatives.
Whatever
but that's $484 billion.
Okay.
And that's earmarked for small businesses, for hospitals, and for testing.
That's post-convict. The planning that, okay, how do we recover from this pandemic? But here's what has the government actually earmarked from government, not from donations, for this, for where we are and where we ought to be in the next 3 months. Everybody is saying that we have to wait for 3 months, and it's true. As it is now, in the communities, one of the observations I have again is that people don't care about social distancing. They're hungry. In fact, there are some communities, their houses itself does not have social distances. So how do you get distance from your neighbor? But if you have food and you have light, they promise that, okay, they are going to do 2 months light. But we've seen all that. I think that the government is still sleeping on this. And that's why we're trying to bring in some NGOs. I'm talking to a couple of NGOs, the Caring Nigeria Foundation, I'm talking to Yaga Foundation, talking to all of them. Let's do this. The Humanity First initiative is to create the awareness that we must not leave it to government alone. In our little capacities, let's begin to do, and also ask questions to government. What is the plan? Because if we don't have a plan, we're all planning that one day we all get back to business. But if our people are not taken care of and then the spread goes on, we'll stay longer at home.
Right, but in fairness to the government, in every country, there's always even in the United States, Europe, and so on, there's been, everybody's been caught off guard by this pandemic. Absolutely. Even today in the UK, the government is under tremendous fire because of its response. The same thing with Donald Trump in America. They have much more sophisticated systems than Nigeria does. But of course, the points that you're making are very valid. And that is that, you can't hold yourself to what the Americans are doing. You have to worry about your own country, and your argument is that the humanitarian response to the threat of the coronavirus in Nigeria is inadequate.
It is, and it's key to our success on this fight. Why I say it's key to our success on this fight is that if people on the street now they call it hunger virus. If you tell people what do you choose between coronavirus and hunger virus, they said coronavirus is curable, but hunger virus is not curable. And so if we must defeat coronavirus, it's more like somebody who has a rumbling tummy and he needs to eat. But he has money to, first of all, buy what to cure his tummy or maybe buy food. So it's intertwined. We can't fight one and leave the other, especially for Africa, especially for Nigeria, our country.
Right.
We need to look at the people, what are their basic needs. And then another thing we need to do is to create a system, a workable system, in which coordinators will be given to different locations, and then if we can get NEPA bills, if during elections we can get stuff from politicians, if they know how to share food and money during elections, they should know how to share food to households.
And they do it pretty successfully during elections.
Of course, they do that, yes. So the interest of our government should go beyond our political ambitions and then do this right. Because if we don't do it right, we are all going to be consumed by it. That is the fear.
Right, and we heard at the outset there warnings from the UN of famine at a global level. What does it mean at a local level for Nigeria?
Well, we cannot re-emphasize that. The truth remains that in Africa, let me use Nigeria as a case study. We were just touted as the poverty capital of the universe, and that means our people are very poor. And the UN is just saying that the planet itself, especially for poor countries, is on the brink of starvation. And that, to me, is directing to us, if we're the headquarters of the poor people, by what the world definition is. I believe in Nigeria very much, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. For Nigeria now, for example, if our poverty level is at 50%, with what the UN is talking about, we might move to 80%, because major of our people depend on their daily job for their feeding. I've seen boys, I do a lot of, I drive alone around town, so I do a lot of personal survey, and I discovered that a sort of group of boys, sitting out there. I don't know whether they're planning evil, but sometimes if I take the courage to say, why are you here? It's okay. This one say I'm a mechanic. This one say I'm a cobbler. I'm a baba. I'm this. There is nothing to do, so that's why we are here.
With me in the studio, Gabriel Ashibi, who works with the Universal Peace Foundation and the Humanity First campaign, organizations that are spending time delivering aid to vulnerable communities in Nigeria and assessing the increasing poverty levels in the country as the pandemic tightens its grip. Gabriel, thank you very much indeed for staying with us.
Thank you, sir.
Now, Nigeria is, of course, already in a horribly abnormal situation with lots of people living in extreme poverty, as we're talking about there, lots of internally displaced people as a result of the insurgency in the northeast. And so COVID-19 is a new threat on top of what is already a pretty devastating humanitarian crisis.
Absolutely. I made a call to an IDP camp in Abuja, one of the coordinators, and I told him, how are you people surviving in this situation right now? And he spoke to me very emotionally. He said, I said, is government coming to you and all that? He told me pump and play that if it's about government, I have his details, I stand to be corrected, but if he says it's about government, we should forget about government, that they have forgotten about government a long time ago. But that, she mentioned a few persons that have come to show love, that whatever I have as a person, I've always been there. This is the time they need it most. They don't even have, sometimes they don't have fuel to power their generator so they can pump water. And let's talk about
and of course water feeding is an essential part of fighting COVID-19.
Absolutely, because you need it to always keep your hands clean. And so I think it has come as a big leadership test, not just for the present government, but for leadership levels, leadership at all levels from the time of 1968 till date. I think we have modeled up stuff in such a way that we didn't define exactly where the vision of our country should be. By now, we should be helping Africa by now. Countries, smaller countries, should be looking up to Africa for aid and all that by now. We shouldn't be the one the world is helping. And so this has come again to model up the situation. And it's really a time to really sit back and think as a nation that exactly where are we going. This might not be the last challenge. If it comes again, we have not even been able to defeat this. What if it happens again? Where are we? Where are we going? That is what it has brought to our table right now.
I have to say it's absolutely fascinating listening to you talk, because there is a certain honesty and clarity that comes from you. What is it that drives you? What propels you into this sort of action that you're taking?
I think, first of all, like I said before, I have a very deep passion for my country. I started from, I didn't go to nursery school. I started from very humble background, but I have my dream that I'll also be a successful young man in my country. And the story has been there. And I feel that what I saw when I was small is not what I'm saying now. When we're singing the national anthem, where they say, arise to call, obey, Nigeria calls, obey, and all that, they're saying that, okay, let the labors of our heroes pass will not be in vain, has always been my line. And so that drives me that I will make my best to make sure I contribute to the development of our country. And it gives me drive. And as somebody who was born from a humble background, I believe that every child is a Nigerian child. But once you treat another person's child as your child, you can be a good leader. We must begin to eschew ourselves from issues of ethnicity, nepotism, religious bigotry when we come into nation building. We should know that what is good for any child in Sokoto is also good for the one in Bayelsa. What is good for the one in Lagos is also good for the one in Benue. And then make sure that we build a Nigerian dream, build a nation where everybody can be proud of. And that's what drives me. And I feel that if I can muster a lot of this generation, we can achieve that.
Well, let me just take you back to the issue of COVID-19 and the difficulties it's imposing on people in Nigeria. There are, of course, restrictions on the population in Nigeria to try to control the spread of the coronavirus, which is why all this is taking place. I mean, there are preventions of large gatherings, quarantine measures, businesses closed, airports, public transport, all of that closed. What does this mean for aid and charity groups like yours that normally help to alleviate poverty and hunger? Because, I mean, I've heard quite a number of them complain that they have problems getting to the areas where there are lots of people who need relief and support.
Okay, that's why I made it very clear that this is a government thing. The government needs to identify those who are in this work of charity and then empower them to be able to move around. Now the indices of COVID-19, people who are already testing positive is getting up. And I think that that figure is not a representation of what's truly on the ground. It is in the high-brow city centers that people are not moving around. In the communities, they are moving around. And if we had the widespread testing, we would have known that this has gone beyond our imagination. So what we need to do to be able to curtail this is, for example, we have about 6 local government areas in Abuja, for example. And so, okay, whatever we call it, let's say we call it Humanity First. And then we say, okay, Humanity First, who is coordinating for Amak, who is coordinating for Kwali. You get to Kwali, okay, now, this is where the central point of collection is. And then who is going to go to Gishiri, who is going to go to Pape, who is going to go to Jai, who is going to go to Dogongada, who is going to go? Okay, how many of you are going there? Okay, now you go on a survey. Let's have an average of how many households are in that environment. This is the package. If you ask us to stay at home per week, this is this package. It's a government thing. Funding has to be made for it. And then we know who is in charge of those relief materials. And so, okay, this package is for 1,000 families. And from what we get from Dogongada, we have 1,000 families. Take it and distribute. There should be accountability. It should be transparent. And we see it. On social media, you see people thanking the government. It will happen. You don't need people to go to the farm this time around. Government needs to begin to create that possibilities by bringing what the people need to stay at home.
Right. Well, whilst people are waiting for the government, and I hope they're listening to you because you're making some very salient points there, whilst they're waiting for that, in terms of the supplies that people like you and your organization need, where are those coming from? Because Nigeria imports most of its medicine and lots of its food. I mean, commercial supplies coming from abroad, basically. I mean, how are those imports affected by the lockdown?
Of course, it's a global pandemic. It's a global issue. Every government right now is struggling to meet up with timelines. Wuhan, where it started from, in China, has reopened business, has reopened markets after 3 months. But I think they work within the availability they had to be able to stay at home and control it for that. It's about control now. We might not get all the materials we need right now, but what we need to do now is to work on what is available and work on control and see that, okay, in the next 1 month, can we control this with what we have? We engage it, because it's an engagement. We engage the pandemic and control it for 1 month. And when you control it for 1 month, it's most likely that certain part of businesses will begin to reopen. That is the only way forward.
Right. Okay.
If we wait for, okay, sir.
Sorry, finish what
If we wait for a perfect situation where all the food, the drugs will come again, we will never have it.
Yes, no, absolutely.
We have to work with what we have now to make sure that we arrest it and work within the timeline. What we have can work with us, and then we can go over it, and then life begins again.
Well, we're almost out of time. You go out regularly into those deprived areas. Let's talk about redesigning the recommendations, because people are being told regularly to wash their hands with warm water, with soap, and to maintain social distance when, as you said, that is just impossible for many people. If we are to redesign the recommendations, what would that be?
Number one is to make sure that people have food. That's my number one. Then number two, of course, awareness is going on. Food is number one, and when I mean food, you provide face masks, you provide sanitizers, and because for some slums, it's impossible to have social distancing. It's impossible. When we were sharing food yesterday, I was impressed to some level when the children, they would tell themselves 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter. And that gave me joy.
So it needs to be redesigned.
Absolutely.
Okay, Gabriel, I want to thank you very much indeed. Gabriel Ashibi works with the Universal Peace Foundation and the Humanity First campaign. Right, Peace Foundation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.